How do the American people feel about the president's deportation policies?
Yeah, let's sort of take a look. We're going to dive into the numbers here, and let's just talk about the most basic metric you can look at, which is...
All right, we have never seen anything like this from CNN. The entire week, that senator was down in El Salvador trying to convince the American public and the world that we need to bring back an illegal immigrant back into America. CNN spent the entire week with poll numbers that said Americans like deportations, Americans like this policy, and they like what Donald Trump is doing, yet Democrats are not getting the hint. You guys are going to enjoy this video because the numbers are wild, and the Democrats still fighting these numbers are just as wild. Here we go. Enjoy.
Donald Trump's net approval rating on immigration. In his first term, he was underwater at this point. 12 points more of the public, in fact, disapproved than approved of the job he was doing. But look at where we are now in April of 2025. He's actually slightly above water at plus 1 point. This is very much unlike the economy where he was above water in term one and is now below water. On immigration, it's the exact opposite of what's going on. And more than that, the numbers have actually stayed pretty steady since January, since, of course, he came into office. A different way that we can look at this is compare what was going on under Joe Biden, what is going on under Donald Trump. And the way we can do this is on immigration, what track are we on? The right track or the wrong track? Back in December, just 14% of the public said we were on the right track. 62%, my goodness gracious, the vast majority said we were on the wrong track. Look at where we are now in April, though. Look at this. 45% of the country says we're on the right track, compared to just 42% who are on the wrong track. So the plurality now say we're on the right track when it comes to immigration. Very much unlike what we saw under Joe Biden, now under Donald Trump. The plurality say we're on the right track, not on the wrong track when it comes to immigration policy.
Now, you guys are going to find this hilarious. CNN is the only news network that will provide the evidence that Americans, they like deportations, but then soon after we'll have a Democrat come on and say, nah, none of that is true.
You just heard CNN's Harry Enten that voters generally back Trump's immigration policies. Today in the Oval Office, President Trump said illegal immigration was, quote, the biggest reason he won re-election. He might be right about that. Do you think that your party is missing something on this issue?
Thanks for having me, Jake. I'd question that polling because when you tell people the stories, you get very different answers. Ask somebody whether they think an Afghani national who helped the U.S. troops find Osama bin Laden and now feels threatened at home and is here on an asylum case because they can't be sure they'll be safe at home and is under temporary protected status but not here legally yet. Should that person be deported? Should a dreamer who has fought for our military, should that person be deported? Should a farm worker who travels back and forth with the seasonal crop, should that person be deported? Should somebody who came here to study for college, fell in love, had a kid, and now has overstayed their visa? These personal stories, people have a much different answer.
Now again, I know a lot of people are not the biggest fans of Jake Tapper, but I think you guys will enjoy his response because you can tell he's like, are you really coming on my show and telling us we're not saying the same thing you guys are saying? You're the ones who are looking ridiculous out here, not us.
Do you think we in the media aren't telling those stories?
These people all, but
I mean, the media, look, the media tells plenty of stories like that. And, you know, we're not asking about individual A or individual B. We're talking about the deportation policy writ large. And there has been a change in public opinion on this in the last 8 years away from your position and towards President Trump's position.
Now, to be fair, some Democrats, they are talking about the specifics, especially in the context of what's going on in El Salvador and the deportations. However, Jasmine Crockett, everyone's favorite, she is back in the media. She hasn't been around for a while now, but here's what she has to say.
And, you know, Maryland Senator Van Hollen just went to El Salvador after meeting with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He said he thinks that El Salvador was feeling some pressure, and that's why they let him meet with him. But ultimately, Nayib Bukele saying he's going to remain in the custody of El Salvador. We need to see more action, though, from people kind of emulating what we saw from Senator Van Hollen, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, kudos to Senator Van Hollen. And honestly, that's what it looks like to be an elected representative. He represents Maryland. This is someone who is a Maryland resident, and he decided that he was going to go down there and check on him. And honestly, I I don't know that I was convinced that he was alive. I really don't. And so I was happy to see that he was alive, number one. But number two, if Senator Van Hollen can get down there, if the president can get up here and get to the White House, then I don't understand why we can't get Abrego up out of there. I mean, we know that they admitted that they were wrong. Now they're trying to double back and say, well, he's this terrible person and all this kind of stuff. But here's the reality. As far as I'm concerned, he's a lot less criminal than the person that's sitting in the White House. Because last time I checked, he doesn't have any criminal convictions. I don't even think he has any outstanding cases versus the guy that still had cases pending when he was sworn in on January 20th and also has 34 felony convictions. So listen, I don't want to hear anything from the Republican Party about how they trying to keep us safe when their fearless leader is actually the biggest criminal thus far that we have seen, because I haven't seen anybody with a rap sheet that looks like the president's.
I am very curious to see how you guys feel about this particular clip. If you could leave your comments down below, I love to read your comments and how you feel about what Jasmine Crockett has to say. I do find it rather disingenuous, or I guess interesting. She's appealing to claims that, you know, Donald Trump, well, he's a felon, and the man down in El Salvador, he's not a felon, thus he's a better person, and we have to bring him back up. Also, Jasmine Crockett, again, whenever she appears on these television shows, I mean, she really shows her ignorance as far as how the Constitution works. Either this is a complete character, or this is truly how she is. I mean, she just admitted she doesn't understand why we wouldn't be able to bring up an illegal immigrant if the president of El Salvador was able to come into America. Quite bizarre.
Okay, let's talk about the polling, and then I want to talk about another thing you mentioned, which is the optics of it. But on the polling, because I think this is important. He's right. Trump has his best favorability on the issue of immigration broadly. But can I ask you to explain something to me?
Please.
You have some polling that shows Americans would be okay with everybody being deported who's here illegally. There's also polling that asks more specifically, if you have been in the United States for 10 years, you paid taxes, you have no criminal record, but you are undocumented, do you support deporting those people? 63% oppose that. So how do we even make sense of these numbers?
Again, I just have to point out, I will never understand the business model of CNN. You have a professional pollster. His sole job on CNN is to create the statistics and polls, and everybody on the network will have the data, and from there they can work with it. Yet, Abby Phillips and others, they just throw him under the bus. I don't know if that's also part of his contract, but I love his response, and if you're a conservative or Republican, I think you can relate.
Yeah, sometimes it's so interesting. You poll the public, and it turns out the public can hold conflicting views even within themselves, right? And it's part of my job to figure out, okay, where do they actually feel on the overall immigration picture? And I think it's important to note, as we have mentioned, is that Donald Trump's net approval rating on immigration is actually positive, which is very much unlike his first term. If you ask, are we on the right track or the wrong track when it comes to immigration policy, the plurality say that we're on the right track, which is very different from where we were just a few months ago under Joe Biden. So yeah, you see those polling and you see it's conflicting. It kind of actually reminds me a little bit of the gun control debate, right? Where you see, oh my God, 90% background checks. And then of course you look at ballot measures in places like Nevada and Maine. And then when it's actually on the ballot, it's basically 50-50. In my opinion, on this particular topic, what we're really talking about and the metric we should be looking to is, do people like, when they ask, do you like what Donald Trump's doing on immigration? And if the plurality says yes, which is what's going on, then that's the number that I think is most representative of the public at large.
So again, even the main pollster from CNN is letting everyone know, including Democrats, including his own co-workers, stay away from the specifics of these pollings, because you could create the wording any way you want. What Abby Phillips was saying is, look, a majority of Americans, they wouldn't mind keeping illegal immigrants in the country if they pay taxes. Well, obviously Americans wouldn't mind because yes, they're paying taxes. But again, you could refigure these pollings to any wording you want, and no matter what, you could probably get what you want as far as the narrative being pushed. But again, it's very important to note, the pollster that you see here on the left on CNN, again, he's telling everybody, we're going to keep it general and generic. That way we understand the totality, that the majority of Americans want deportations. There's just no way of getting around it.
Let's talk about Trump voters and how they feel. Do they regret their vote?
I mean, this is the big question, right? I hear all these stories, all these articles. All the Trump voters, they regret what they did back in 2024. I'm here to tell you, very few of them regret what they did back in 2024. What are we talking about? Trump voters looking back at 2024. We got a new poll out. The poll was conducted this month. What percentage would change their vote to a different candidate? We're talking just 2%, just 2%. That's not even a wide spot on the road. And then there's this additional 1% who say they would rather not vote. We're talking overall under 5% might or would have changed their vote, Donald Trump voters back in 2024. And then you ask, okay, the same question to Kamala Harris voters, and it turns out the numbers are rather similar. So if there was a repeat, if folks got to be able to redo their vote that they had back in 2024, would the result be any different? I doubt it would be. I doubt it would be, or it would still be extremely close. The bottom line is, for all this talk of Trump voters regretting their vote, in the numbers, it really just doesn't show up, John.
Again, CNN really was giving a layup to Democrats this week. In fact, this poll is so special because he's literally telling Democrats and everyone else, you gotta stop trying to convince people who voted for Donald Trump that was a bad idea. There's no way, once again, to get around it. The majority of voters, and you can leave your comments down below if you voted for Donald Trump, you can let me know if you're happy. Every single thing that Donald Trump is doing right now, yeah, we voted for that. Now, you can make an argument as far as the speed of things, and we saw this towards the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency, especially with the eggs, and right now with the economy. But as far as the deportations, CNN, man, just really giving a layup to the Democrats. Stay away from anything deportations and stay away from, you're not going to like that you voted for Donald Trump.
To be about what can you actually prove that someone has done?
I actually am not even all that worried about all the things that we have found out in the wake of the investigations into this guy. What I am worried about is that, and I'm going to grant you, he has a withholding order, and he should not have gone to El Salvador.
And they admitted it was a mistake.
But even if you grant that, he has an adjudicated deportation order, and you have Democrat public officials falling all over themselves trying to get him back here without thinking through the next step, which is he's literally going to be deported somewhere else.
But not to
But
a
my
prison.
suspicion is when they bring him back, they're going to try to keep him here. That's the next part of the game.
Supposed to be about.
All right, if you are still watching this video, I really appreciate it. I mean, everything is going to change here very soon as I post this video because there is another member of government from Oregon, Congresswoman. She is flying down to El Salvador, and she is also, I guess, going to attempt to release that man and bring him back up to the United States. But the question everyone has is, well, if this illegal immigrant comes back up to America, is he not just going to get re-released? And the Trump administration said, yes, he will. So let's see what happens. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you for being here. God bless, and we'll see you all later.